The triage dome pulsed with a dull green light, barely visible through the smoke drifting in from the shattered eastern wing of Outpost Vierla. The air stank of singed polymers, and something far worse burned flesh. Sensors beeped interrhythmic patterns, and automated med drones zipped overhead, carrying blood packs and surgical tools. Zane Darnell lay motionless on one of the lower-tier trauma tables, his uniform shredded, the lower half of his right leg mangled beyond recognition. Shrapnel had torn through his thigh, embedding into muscle and artery. His left shoulder was dislocated, his heart rate was dropping, even conscious thought was slipping. A tall, translucent-skinned alien physician named Erix floated beside the table, 6 fingers moving rapidly across the holo-scan controls. Erix's elongated eyes dimmed slightly in disappointment. "He is not viable," Erix said in perfect standard. "Cardiac rhythm is erratic. Internal hemorrhaging continues, bone density compromised, recovery probability is under 3%. "He's not dead," said Winry Elowen, a nurse from Chicago, her hands already pressing a hemostatic patch against Zane's upper thigh. "Not yet." Erix didn't look up. "Not yet" is irrelevant. "His system will collapse in minutes. Our protocols demand efficient allocation of resources." "You're giving up." Her voice cracked but grew louder. "He's still breathing." Erix tilted its head, then turned to another table without another word. A drone followed it, repositioning supplies mid-air. Winry stared after them, then back at Zane, who was barely clinging to awareness. "Zane," she whispered, leaning close. "You hear me?" He blinked once, slowly. His lips barely moved. "Hurts. Bad, I know. You're not going anywhere." She tapped her comms. "I need a level 4 evac kit and a portable blood plasma line now. Manual only. Triage override code Elowen 7. The AI system hesitated. "Override accepted." It finally buzzed. It took less than a minute for the kit to arrive, skidding to a halt beside her on automated wheels. She opened it, hands already slick with blood. She worked without pause, clamping arteries, stabilizing the shattered femur, resetting the shoulder with a sickening pop that made Zane groan even in near unconsciousness. 2 other alien medics passed by, both glancing at Zane but saying nothing. Their protocols were clear. 3% was a waste of effort. "Help me," Winry barked at one of them. "Hold the leg steady," the smaller one, a being with a crystalline outer shell named Call, paused. "There's nothing left to stabilize." "I didn't ask for an opinion." "I asked for your hands." Call hesitated, then stepped forward silently, holding the ruined limb as she inserted a temporary bone scaffold. Zane gasped, convulsed. "Sedative," she snapped. Call administered it, and Zane's shaking eased. The bleeding stopped after 22 minutes. But Zane was still fading. His vitals were threadbare. Winry sat beside him through the night, her eyes never leaving the monitor. When morning came, she was still there, and so was he. The next 48 hours were a blur of patchwork surgery and improvised medicine. The outpost's main surgical unit had been destroyed in the initial attack. Only the backup dome, a quarter the size, remained functional. Supplies were limited, and power even more so. Erix returned twice, both times glancing at Zane as if confirming that yes, he still inexplicably lived. "Why persist?" Erix asked finally. "Because I can't not," Winry said, dabbing Zane's forehead. "That's what we do." Erix shook its head as if unable to reconcile her logic, then moved on. By the 4th day, Zane's vitals had stabilized. He was conscious again for longer stretches, though speech remained minimal. Still, he tried. "Why didn't you let me go?" he asked one afternoon. "Because I don't leave people behind." He blinked slowly. "Couldn't move my legs. You had a massive arterial tear and your femur was in 3 pieces. We grafted a scaffold. You're lucky you didn't bleed out." "Felt like I did." He passed out again shortly after, but Winry saw a flicker of something in his face, a crack of defiance beneath the pain. A week later, a transport from the Central Galactic Medical Hub finally arrived. The team that disembarked included 2 senior trauma specialists from the Vireland Confederacy and 1 human exosurgeon. They reviewed Zane's chart, examined his condition, and called Winry into a side room. "You did the impossible," said Dr. Raylish, the human. "We're transferring him to a long-term care ship. He'll need months of rehab, maybe more, but you saved his life." "Will he walk?" Raylish paused. "If the bone grafts hold and the muscle regrowth therapy takes, yes. But it'll be a long road." Winry exhaled and nodded. As the team began to prepare Zane for transport, Eric's approached her again, this time without the cold detachment. "You risked your own health, ignored protocol, expended resources on a lost case." "Why? Because we don't always know what's lost," she said. "Sometimes we just have to try." Eric studied her for a long moment. "You are unpredictable. Most of us are." The medical frigate had everything the outpost didn't: sterile rooms, robotic surgical arms, neuromuscular stimulators. Zane was moved into a biostasis pod for the journey. Winry stayed in the onboard nurses' quarters, checking his stats every 4 hours. The journey took 5 days. Zane regained lucidity halfway through. He could speak again, though his voice was hoarse. "Did you punch that alien who called me a waste of resources?" "No," she said, checking his Roman 4. "But I made him hold your leg while I drilled bone pins." Zane chuckled weakly. "That's worse." By the time they reached the orbital station, he was out of immediate danger. But the hard part was only beginning. The rehab center was carved into the side of an artificial asteroid orbiting a white dwarf. It was quiet, clean, and filled with patients from across the galaxy: burn victims, amputees, neural trauma cases. Zane was wheeled into a recovery room, his leg still suspended in an exo frame. Dr. Raylish assigned him a strict 6-month program. Winry remained as his attending nurse, despite offers to rotate elsewhere. "You don't have to stay," Zane told her one morning. "I know, but you are," she shrugged. "Someone has to make sure you do your exercises." The first 3 weeks were agony. Zane's leg muscles had atrophied. Every stretch, every lift, every attempt to stand ended in sweat and curses, but he didn't give up, not once. Winry adjusted his brace daily, monitored his vitals, brought him meals, and sometimes just sat with him when the days felt too long. One evening, after a particularly grueling session, Zane looked over at her from the bed. "You didn't let me die." "No," she said softly. "You could have." "I didn't want to." He didn't respond. He didn't need to. At the 2-month mark, Zane walked 10 steps with assistance. At 4 months, he walked 30 on his own. At 6 months, he climbed a flight of stairs, slowly, painfully, but without help. The day he was cleared for active duty reassignment, he sat in the courtyard garden, watching the artificial sun flicker across the dome. Winry joined him, a datapad in her lap. "I got a transfer offer," she said. "Where to?" "Earth. Teaching hospital," he nodded. "You should take it." "I might." They sat in silence for a moment. "Zane?" "Yeah, I'm glad you made it." He looked at her, then down at the scars on his leg. "Me too." 3 months after Zane Darnell was cleared for reassignment, the transport ferrying him from the orbital rehab center to the diplomatic sector of the Ilian arcology suffered a systems failure mid-dock. He spent the next 27 minutes manually rerouting coolant lines through an open maintenance hatch to prevent a core cascade, dragging himself through the crawlspace with one good leg and a wrench between his teeth. When the emergency crew arrived, they found him leaning against a bulkhead, panting, soaked in hydraulic fluid, and alive. "You're not cleared for 0G strain," a technician said, wide-eyed. "I was cleared for duty," Zane muttered. Didn't say anything about sitting still. He didn't tell them he had passed out for 15 seconds midway through, or that his leg brace had cracked. By the time he reported to the Ilian Diplomatic Liaison Corps the next morning, the incident was trending on the interspecies news feed. A Vireland analyst on Channel 7 called it reckless biological stubbornness. A Terran journalist just called it Tuesday. The Ilian arcology spiraled like a glass helix over the equatorial line of Ishari Prime. Its inner chambers were gravity-adjustable, and its corridors were lined with flora from 37 planets. The air was cool and heavy with the scent of moss spores and electric pollen. Zane's uniform itched. He hadn't worn it since before the outpost. Waiting outside the appointment module was an official from the Diplomatic Cultural Exchange Tall, with segmented limbs and a head shaped like a crescent moon. "You are Zane Darnell," it said. "Last I checked. I am Tef. I was informed you have survived multiple incidents beyond your species' statistical norms. Sounds like me. This makes you suitable for a task requiring extreme psychological elasticity." Zane followed Tef through a corridor of shifting walls that adjusted with every turn. At one intersection, a panel retracted to reveal a chamber filled with high-frequency chimes and rotating cubes. Inside waited a delegation of the Jot Collective. Their species resembled translucent jelly encased in mechanical shells. Each one emitted a low hum and communicated through synchronized lights. "They lost their last cultural liaison," Tef said without turning. "Lost, emotionally overwhelmed. Self-ejected into a vacuum. We recovered most of the body." Zane blinked. "And your plan is to put me in the same room." They're requesting human engagement. Apparently they enjoy unpredictability. The Jot nearest him blinked yellow and extended a thin metal arm. Zane shook it. The lights flashed green, blue, red. The hum increased. "That wasn't a greeting," Tef said. "It was a challenge. Too late." The Jot emitted a burst of violet light, then rotated its entire body 3 full turns. The others followed suit. Tef's arms twitched. "They believe you've accepted the challenge. You must now demonstrate a superior adaptation reflex." Zane looked around. "In here, immediately." One of the Jot opened a panel in its shell and extended a tray with 3 items: a molten rock, a sharp bone fragment, and a sealed vial of something fizzing. Zane picked up the bone fragment, turned it slowly, then jabbed it into the molten rock until it stuck. "Symbolic fusion of organic and inorganic elements," he said. The Jot pulsed magenta. Tef murmured something in its own tongue, then turned back to Zane. "They're delighted. You've been invited to their thought hatchery." "Great." "What's a thought hatchery?" "Something that caused the last liaison to scream for 7 minutes before losing consciousness." 37 hours later, Zane stood in a temperature-controlled vat of semi-viscous fluid, wearing a pressure membrane suit with 12 neural contact points. He was surrounded by floating orbs that emitted pulsing sounds at irregular intervals. The Jot floated around him in silence. Then one of them released a cloud of nanomist. Zane coughed, then sneezed. The lights turned gold. "They're pleased," said a translator drone floating overhead. "Because I sneezed. Because you reacted organically. They're testing for non-linear cognitive response." Zane reached for one of the orbs and tapped it. A high-pitched screech echoed across the chamber. All the Jot froze. Then, one by one, they began to spin. The translator beeped. "You have initiated a resonance cycle. You must now complete the sequence." "How?" "They do not know. That is why it is a test." Zane placed both hands on his head and pretended to be struck by a revelation. Then slowly, he dipped his entire body under the fluid, held his breath for 9 seconds, then surfaced and shouted, "Bingo!" A long silence followed. Then the chamber lights dimmed to a soft indigo. The translator beeped again. "You have been granted the status of conceptual anomaly. They will now consider your recommendations as if they were glimpses into a higher logic framework." Tef met him outside the chamber. "You are now the highest-ranked human in Jot cultural affairs." "I just pretended to win a game that didn't exist." "Precisely." 5 days later, Zane was summoned to a cross-species emergency conference. The issue: a diplomatic breakdown with the Soral Dominion. The Soral had taken offense to a perceived insult in a culinary exchange. "They claim your species deliberately poisoned them with fermented fungus," said a liaison named Vol. who resembled a walking starfish made of glass. Zane flipped through the report. That was cheese. They ate it, then began hallucinating and declared war on lactose. They asked for something uniquely human, we gave them Roquefort. They saw visions of their ancestors dancing. They're welcome. The room fell silent. Finally, Vole turned to him. Will you mediate? Absolutely, but I'm bringing crackers. Later that evening, Zane sat across from 3 Soral diplomats in a chamber filled with filtered air and ambient waterfall sounds. A platter of neutral nutrient blocks sat between them. I've reviewed your concerns, he said. And I'd like to propose a compromise. The tallest Soral blinked its upper eyes. Speak. We introduce you to chutney. They stared. It's fruit. It's spicy. It's confusing. But it won't make you see your dead great-uncles doing the macarna. The Soral conferred via subharmonic pulses. Then the tall one spoke again. If it causes time distortion, we will retaliate. Deal. The chutney was served in translucent dishes. The Soral sampled it cautiously. One of them chirped. Your tongue is vibrating, Zane said. That's good. The tallest one inclined its head. We are. Intrigued. Then we're back on speaking terms. For now, Zane stood, stretched his damaged leg carefully, and offered a small bow. As he exited, Tef met him by the door. You have now resolved 5 interspecies conflicts in 9 days. I'm trying to beat my high score. We may require your assistance in the Fey Dominion next. What's the crisis? They believe humanity's use of sarcasm is a form of psychic aggression. Zane grinned. They're not wrong. Later that night, he sat on a suspended walkway overlooking the reactor gardens. Below, bioluminescent moss glowed in rhythmic pulses, and wind chimes sang on the artificial breeze. He tapped his wrist terminal. A message blinked from Winry Elowen. He opened it. You still upright? It read. He tapped a reply. Barely, but I'm making friends. Below, a yacht passed by, humming like a kitchen appliance in love. Zane leaned back against the railing. Never thought I'd survive a war, he muttered. Now I'm arguing chutney politics with space jelly. The wind picked up, and somewhere a siren wailed. He stood. Time to meet the Fae. Zane's left eye twitched involuntarily as the Fey interpreter clicked its mandibles in what he could only assume was either anticipation or disdain. The chamber was cooled to a crisp 20 degrees Celsius to accommodate their physiology, and his leg brace had started to ache from the chill. Despite the discomfort, he kept both arms loosely at his sides. Directly across the negotiation table, the Fey diplomat shifted its weight, the carapace along its thorax rippling with iridescent patterns that matched the translator's tone. You used vocal inflection to convey the opposite of your literal statement, the translator announced. This is interpreted as lexical violence. I said, of course, your bureaucratic efficiency is inspiring. That's not violent, Zane said, adjusting his sleeve. That's sarcasm. It's a survival tool. Your species employs contradiction to express disapproval. This is incompatible with direct logic communication. Look, if we're going to start banning irony, you're going to lose 90% of our literature and all of our sitcoms. The Fae let out a series of low chuffs. The translator hesitated. They suggest your recreational narratives should be purged for promoting emotional duplicity. Zane leaned forward. You know what else promotes emotional duplicity? Diplomacy? Another long pause. The Fae's dorsal spines twitched. The translator resumed. They request an example of sincere human expression devoid of irony, satire, or metaphor. Zane exhaled. Fine. He stood, limped over to the wall panel, and tapped his wrist terminal. A holographic projection of a live Terran feed flickered into the air. An elderly man seated at a piano in a subway station, playing Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata while a stray dog napped nearby. This is New York, he said. No one paid that guy. He just showed up and started playing. He's not performing for money or status. He's doing it because it makes something quiet inside him feel less alone. The chamber was silent. The Fae's spines lowered slightly. The translator said nothing at first, then finally spoke again. They accept this as an authentic gesture. They will withdraw the diplomatic complaint and initiate a study of Terran musical behavior. Zane tapped the projection off. Glad we could clear that up without banning irony from the galaxy. Outside the chamber, Tef was waiting with a fresh report slate. You appear to have disarmed a species through subway music. It's cheaper than war, Zane replied, rotating his shoulder to work out a lingering knot. 3 hours later, he was in an atmospheric bar on ring level 6, sipping a non-alcoholic variant of bourbon that tasted like wet driftwood. A pair of engineers from the Salkin Reach argued over propulsion signatures nearby, while a trio of small, cube-shaped beings played a game that involved launching rubber bands at each other's corners. Winry approached from the far end, hair tied back, her uniform jacket slung over one shoulder. "I heard you got the Fae to stop trying to outlaw sarcasm," she said, sliding into the seat across from him. "I showed them a piano player," he replied. "They backed off. You're going to make the rest of us look bad," he shrugged. "You came all the way to the upper ring just to tell me that." "I came because you missed your follow-up with the nerve specialist this morning." Zane winced. "I got pulled into the Fae meeting. You knew about the appointment for 2 weeks." He took another sip. "I didn't think I needed it. Your gait's uneven. You're compensating with your hip. That's going to cause misalignment in 3 months. I'll stretch." "You're not stretching, you're limping." He didn't answer, she leaned in. "You survived a battlefield, you survived rehab. You've survived jelly diplomats and sarcasm tribunals, but you won't survive yourself if you keep ignoring the damage." He looked at her, then down at the drink. "Okay," he said. "I'll reschedule. Tomorrow, early," he nodded. "Fine." She stood, tapped the table with her knuckles, and walked off without another word. The next morning, just past local dawn, Zane sat on a padded diagnostic bench while a medical technician named Solarer ran a mobility scan. Her tools buzzed softly as a neuromuscular map unfolded in the air beside them. "You've got residual stiffness in the lower gluteus medius and minor fibrillation in the anterior tibialis," she said. "English, please. Your butt's tight and your shins twitchy." "Thanks." She handed him a small foam roller. "You'll use this twice a day for 2 weeks. I'm uploading a routine. And I'm scheduling you for electrotherapy. Do I get a lollipop? You get to walk without a limp." He grunted and rose from the bench, testing the leg. The tightness was still there, but a little less sharp than yesterday. Outside the clinic, Tef met him again. "You are requested at the Unified Council Hall. The Corthan Tribunal has presented a proposal requiring human review. Do they believe we're violating something now? They believe you may be the only species capable of withstanding exposure to their initiation gauntlet." That's not a sentence I expected to hear today. The last 9 candidates lost consciousness during Phase 2. Let me guess. "You want me to try it? You are the only available human with trauma resilience above threshold. Fine. But I'm charging overtime." The Corthan Gauntlet chamber was shaped like a spiral shell, with each segment representing a new sensory test. Zane was given no instructions. The Corthan merely gestured him forward and recorded biofeedback as he progressed. The first section blasted him with subsonic frequencies that rattled his teeth. He walked through. The second filled the air with a scent that triggered an immediate emotional response, grief so sharp it made him stumble. He kept walking. The third section simulated atmospheric collapse. He dropped to a knee, bracing against the wall, still moved forward. By the fourth segment, his sweat had soaked through his collar and his heart rate was up 20%. He emerged from the final chamber, blinking against the sudden light. One of the Corthan approached, its skin changing hue with what he recognized as astonishment. "You persevered," it said. Zane wiped his brow. "We have a saying, we've been through worse. Your species is functionally irrational, thank you." They bowed. "You have satisfied the initiation. We will proceed with the proposal." Zane limped out of the chamber, breath steadying. Later, back in his quarters, he lay on a recovery mat, knees bent, roller under his lower back. The scar down his leg itched, but he ignored it. The door chimed. He opened it to find Winry holding a datapad and a small container. "You passed the Corthan gauntlet, just barely." They sent a gift. She handed him the container. Inside was a metal token shaped like a spiral, etched with Corthan runes. Zane held it up. "This mean I'm in their club. It means they think you're indestructible. I'm not." "I know," she said. "But you keep acting like it anyway." He laughed, low and tired. She tapped the datapad. "Also, I scheduled your next 3 rehab sessions. You miss one and I'll assign you to the diplomatic complaints desk for the Sferati. They argue about punctuation." He nodded. "I'll be there." She turned to leave, then paused. "You're not the same guy from Viola." "No," he said. "He didn't walk so funny." She smiled and walked away. Zane looked down at the token again, then set it on the side table. Outside, the station's lights dimmed to simulate evening. Somewhere, a chime rang to mark the end of shift. He lay back, stretched out his leg, and exhaled. He'd survived the impossible. Again. But this time, he'd remember to stretch.